A shiver moves through the dust-heavy air whenever the archivists speak of the cedar crate. It was discovered in the spring of 1912, buried beneath the collapsed floorboards of an abandoned townhouse on Pryor Street in Atlanta. The workmen who pried it open expected nothing more than rotten linens or rusted tools. Instead, they found a single object, an oval portrait, sealed in warped glass and framed in tarnished silver. The face staring back at them was that of a young man, impossibly handsome, almost statuesque. His eyes seemed to follow the workers, to study them, to judge them, and behind him in the faded watercolor background were faint silhouettes, 4 figures, blurred as though the artist's hand had trembled while painting them. Pinned to the back of the frame was a strip of parchment. Only 2 lines were legible. He walked among the houses of Atlanta, and no marriage survived him. The crate was carted away, but every man who touched it claimed the same sensation, that the smiling figure in the portrait was smiling at them, knowingly. No official archive claimed ownership, and no historian wanted the responsibility. What remained was a mystery buried in soot and silence, a tale whispered in fragments, the story of a slave whose beauty turned plantations into battlefields, who brought ruin to the wealthiest households, and whose very existence was said to warp the moral order of a city still in its adolescence. Before we continue with the story of the man once called Devereaux, join our community of mystery lovers. Hit subscribe and tell us in the comments which state you're listening from. Your support helps us uncover more forgotten stories, like this one. The year was 1850, and America trembled at the crossroads of expansion and division. Atlanta was a young city then, barely more than a crossroads of red clay and ambition. The rail line cut through forests thick with pine, and the air carried the mingled scents of damp earth, wood smoke, and livestock. Churches multiplied faster than houses, their bells clanging through the early morning haze as though trying to drown the rising hum of commerce. Street vendors shouted beneath the shadow of new-built brick facades. Wagon wheels groaned against cobblestone. Women in calico skirts lifted their hems to avoid the sludge that pooled after every rainstorm. The air was thick with the rhythm of hammers, saws, and the grinding gears of a city determined to become the heart of the South. Beneath that ambition, however, lay the foundation upon which the economy was built: human bondage. Enslaved people moved like a second shadowed population, seen but unacknowledged. They chopped timber in the outskirts, tended to the large houses of Peachtree Road, cooked in sweltering kitchens, and worked the small farms that fed the growing settlement. Their voices carried in low, spiritual hymns after dusk, drifting from cabins that stood in neat rows behind wealthy homes. Owners pretended not to hear them. Atlanta was a place of rising fortunes, and with rising fortunes came rising fears. Planter families, newly wealthy, guarded their reputations with the desperation of those who had everything to lose. Marriage bonds were currency. Bloodlines were fortresses. A whisper could destroy a woman's standing. A rumor could shatter a man's claim to honor. The city's newspapers printed columns preaching virtue, duty, and obedience. Ministers thundered from elevated pulpits about the divine order of society, the God-ordained hierarchy that placed each soul in its proper position. But behind closed doors, shutters rattled with the winds of secrets, envy, lust, resentment. None were strangers to this young city. And into this volatile world, according to the oldest accounts, there arrived a man whose mere presence could unmake the structure that enslaved him. Some stories claim he was purchased from Virginia. Others insist he was born on a small plantation outside Macon. All agree on one thing: his beauty did not seem of this world. A beauty that drew eyes, stirred jealousies, provoked whispers. A beauty that, in a society rigidly obsessed with control, became a threat. No one knew then how far the damage would reach, nor how many families would fracture before the city realized it had underestimated him. The first name recorded in connection with Devereaux belonged to a woman whose voice once carried through every parlor on Peachtree Street. Eleanor Haraway was 26 in the spring of 1850, a wife of 5 years, and the daughter of a shipping merchant who had clawed his fortune from the Gulf trade. She possessed the delicate beauty prized among Atlanta's rising class: porcelain skin, dark hair pinned in elaborate coils, and a way of holding herself with the poise of someone taught from birth never to reveal uncertainty. But those who knew her well, the few who heard her speak outside the earshot of her husband, whispered that Eleanor lived with an unease she never named. She first saw Devereaux in the courtyard behind her home, while the April sun filtered through the columns and cast gold across the packed dirt. Her husband, Marcus Haraway, had purchased 3 new workers from an estate sale, and Devereaux was among them. Eleanor described that moment years later in one of her letters seized by investigators. "His eyes met mine," she wrote, "and for the briefest instant, it felt as though he'd known every thought I'd tried to bury." Marcus noticed her staring. She recalled him clearing his throat, the way a man does when he senses something he cannot name. "Eleanor," he muttered, "best you go inside. There's much to do today." She had obeyed, but not before Devereaux's gaze held hers 1 second too long. Another account came from a woman whose life intersected with the Haraways in ways polite society refused to discuss. Ruth Lynn Carter, a midwife of formidable presence, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver threading through her thick braids. She lived in a modest cabin near the outskirts, where the pines opened into a clearing. People in town trusted her with births, sickness, and secrets that should have never existed. She met Devereaux only once, but it was an encounter she never forgot. "I walked past the Haraway place one evening," she recounted to a local preacher years later, "and I saw him standing alone near the well. The sky was turning that deep indigo before night falls, and he was just still, like a figure carved from dark marble. He looked at me and nodded, polite, but Lord help me, I felt my bones chill." "Did he speak?" the preacher asked. "He did, and his voice, soft, almost sorrowful. He said, 'Man, do you ever feel like something is waiting to happen, and you can't see what it is?'" Ruthlyn had gripped the handle of her basket. "Every day," she told him, "but for some of us, that feeling is just survival." She said Devereaux smiled, not joyfully, but with a strange resignation. "Then we understand each other," he murmured. Others painted a different portrait of Devereaux. Elijah Breeden, an overseer from a neighboring estate, described him as too quiet, too observant, like he was studying every soul around him. Elijah had a reputation for cruelty, a man who used his authority to inflate his own importance. During an estate inspection, he approached Devereaux and demanded to know his skill set. Devereaux kept his hands at his sides, his expression serene. "I can work the stables, sir," he replied. "That all?" Devereaux hesitated. Elijah claimed later that this hesitation angered him. "Speak up, boy," Elijah barked. "You got a tongue." "I have many skills," Devereaux said, "but not all of them belong to me." Elijah never forgot the way those words landed, like a riddle whispered through the cracks of reason. The fourth figure woven into the early tapestry of this story was a man named Thaddeus Primley, a junior journalist for the Southern Banner. Young, ambitious, and painfully earnest, Thaddeus sought stories that would earn him a permanent column. His editor sent him to cover estate auctions, community church fairs, and the growing railway expansion. But Thaddeus kept notes on matters never intended for print: domestic disputes, rumors of impropriety among the wealthy, strange disturbances reported by enslaved workers. More than once he recorded overhearing remarks about a man too beautiful for his own good. The earliest of these entries was dated June 1850. "They speak of him in lowered voices," Thaddeus wrote, "as if naming him aloud invites misfortune. The wives of several merchants have taken ill with unexplained fevers. Their husbands whisper of distractions in the household. One name keeps appearing, Devereaux. I have yet to see him myself, but the way they speak, it is not fear, but something worse, a dread laced with fascination. What none of them understood, Eleanor with her trembling curiosity, Ruthlyn with her quiet intuition, Elijah with his suspicion, and Thaddeus with his intellectual hunger, was that their paths were not coincidental. In Atlanta's rigid hierarchy, lives rarely intersected unless forced by circumstance. Yet each of them remembered Devereaux vividly, as if fate had carved a space for him in their memories. Eleanor's memories deepened into something more dangerous. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered into the dim hallway outside her bedchamber. Candlelight flickered along the walls. She paused at the balcony overlooking the courtyard, where shadows clung to every corner. There, she heard a voice, low, melodic, singing a song she did not recognize. Devereaux was washing the courtyard stones, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, his movements smooth and unhurried. She tried to retreat before he noticed her, but the wooden floorboard betrayed her. Devereaux looked up. Their eyes locked again. "Forgive me, Madame Haraway," he said quietly. "The night works easier than the day." "You sing beautifully," she whispered before realizing the impropriety of her words. "Songs help the hands forget they are tired," he replied. "Sometimes they help the heart forget too." She should have left, but something rooted her in place. "What burdens your heart?" He held her gaze without flinching. "A truth I have not learned yet, but I feel it moving closer." Ruthlyn's impression of him grew heavier after that evening near the well. She began to hear things during her visits to nearby cabins, murmurs of strange dreams, of wives waking in the night drenched in sweat, of husbands unsettled without knowing why. Every rumor circled back, faintly but undeniably, to the Haraway household. Elijah, meanwhile, warned Marcus that Devereaux would cause trouble. Marcus dismissed him. "A handsome face does not make a threat," he scoffed. Elijah shook his head. "In this world, it does." And Thaddeus, hungry for the truth behind the city's restlessness, finally arranged to observe the Haraway workers. When he saw Devereaux for the first time, he felt it, that strange, unsettling gravity. Not enchantment, but recognition, as though Devereaux carried a story that reached beyond his own lifetime. "Sir," Thaddeus said, notebook in hand, "may I ask your name?" Devereaux glanced at him with polite detachment. "Names are given," he said softly, "but some men do not get to keep theirs." "Is Devereaux not your true name?" "It is the one they use," he answered. "That is enough." Thaddeus wrote only one line after their meeting. "This man will unravel something in this city." None of them knew then how literal that prediction would become, how marriages would crumble, how friends would turn on each other, how the city, already trembling beneath the surface, would be thrust into a darkness deeper than any sermon warned against. The first signs came softly, like the faint tremor before a distant storm, small enough to ignore, unsettling enough to linger in the back of the mind. Atlanta, in the summer of 1850, simmered beneath a relentless sun, its streets thick with dust and tension. Heat warped the air above the rooftops, and conversations drifted in hushed currents through the market squares. People spoke of restlessness in their homes, wives falling ill without cause, husbands waking from nightmares that dissolved the moment their eyes opened. Most dismissed it all as seasonal melancholy. Only later did they remember the timing. Eleanor Haraway was among the first to sense something slipping out of place. In early July, she began waking in the dark hour before dawn, with a feeling heavy in her chest, as though she had been crying in her sleep. The physicians sent by Marcus blamed the humidity, nerves, and, most convenient of all, her delicate constitution. But Eleanor knew better. She was not fragile. She was frightened. The dreams were what frightened her most. A courtyard washed in moonlight, footsteps echoing against the stones, a man's silhouette, broad-shouldered, graceful, standing at the threshold of her room. She never saw his face in the dreams, but she woke with the certainty that she already knew it. One morning, as she dressed at her vanity, she caught sight of a dark shape reflected in the glass behind her. She spun around, heart thundering, but the hallway was empty. Only her own shallow breaths broke the silence. She told no one, but her behavior did not go unnoticed. Ruthlyn Carter, visiting to tend to a young servant girl with fever, paused as Eleanor crossed the parlor with a distant look in her eyes. Ruthlyn waited until they were alone. "Ma'am Haraway," she said gently, "are you sleepin' well?" Eleanor stiffened. "That is hardly something I need to discuss." Ruthlyn nodded slowly. "Sometimes the body speaks even when the mouth does not." "I'm fine," Eleanor insisted too quickly. Ruthlyn's eyes flicked toward the courtyard window, where Devereaux was leading a horse toward the stables. "If anything weighs on you," she murmured, "I hope you find someone to speak it to." Eleanor followed her gaze for a moment too long. The second sign appeared miles away, in the quarters behind the Whitcomb estate. Workers there whispered about strange sounds at night, not the usual murmurs from restless sleepers, but soft, rhythmic knocking on the cabin walls. Always 3 knocks, always in the same slow cadence. A woman named Idella, known for her steady temperament, described waking to the sensation of someone standing beside her bed. When she opened her eyes, no one was there, but a faint scent lingered in the room. Earth and horses, and something sweet she couldn't name. A week later, Idella confided in Ruthlyn during a routine visit. "It felt like a presence," she said, voice trembling. "Not evil, but expectant." "Expectant of what?" Ruthlyn asked. Idella shook her head. "I fear to know." Word traveled quickly between cabins. Faster still were the rumors linking the Haraway estate to the unease. Secrets passed like embers, small, glowing in the dark, gathering heat. But the third sign was the one the city could not ignore. In mid-July, a man named Jonas Pickering, the husband of a prominent merchant's daughter, was found wandering the edge of the forest near Entrenchment Creek at dawn. His clothes were soaked, his boots were caked in black mud. His face was streaked with tears he could not explain. When neighbors brought him home, he appeared dazed, unable to recall how he arrived there. Thaddeus Primley visited the Pickering household after hearing murmurs in the marketplace. He found Jonas sitting near the hearth, staring into the flames with hollow eyes. Thaddeus introduced himself and asked gently if Jonas could describe what he remembered. Jonas swallowed hard. "I saw him," he whispered. Thaddeus leaned forward. "Saw who?" I do not know. I couldn't see his face, but he was standing at the foot of my bed, and I felt, God help me, I felt drawn." His voice cracked, as though he wasn't a stranger to me at all. Thaddeus exchanged a troubled glance with Jonas's wife, Abigail. She stood with her hands twisting her apron strings, her face pale. "Our marriage has been strained for weeks," she admitted. "Jonas wakes with scratches on his arms, and he swears he doesn't remember making them. He says he dreams of someone calling his name." "And you, Mrs. Pickering?" Thaddeus asked. She hesitated before answering. "I dream too, not of the same figure, but of a face I can't forget. I saw him in town months ago. A striking man, working for the Haraway family. It sounds foolish, but ever since," her voice dropped, "something feels unsettled inside our home." Thaddeus felt a prickling beneath his skin. "May I ask?" he said carefully. "The man's name." "Devereaux," she whispered. By the end of the month, 6 households spoke of odd disturbances. Servants claimed lights flickered in empty rooms. Dogs howled at windows where nothing stood. Doors swayed despite the still air. Some blamed the oppressive heat. Others blamed spiritual unrest, the consequence of sins left unnamed. But a small circle of people, those whose lives had brushed against Devereaux's, felt a heavier truth pressing against their conscience. Eleanor grew more withdrawn. Marcus began drinking earlier in the day. Ruthlyn prayed longer at night. Elijah Breeden, unnerved by sleepless nights and sudden chills in the barn, warned Marcus again. "That man of yours," Elijah growled. "There's something not right about him." Marcus slammed his glass on the table. "Enough of this damn superstition." Elijah's jaw tightened. Men don't fall apart for no reason. Cities whisper in Marcus, and whispers have a way of becoming truth. Thaddeus, meanwhile, scribbled furiously in his journal, piecing together reports that formed a shape he couldn't quite see. He wrote one sentence at the page's edge. If these accounts are linked, the link is human, and deceptively calm. And the rumors intensified. The city exhaled in collective unease. And still, Devereaux moved through the world with the quiet grace of a man untouched by the turmoil around him, though those who watched closely saw something in his expression changing. A shadow beneath the serenity. A flicker of sorrow. Or worse, recognition. The first signs of horror had taken root. No one yet understood the pattern, but the pattern was forming, and soon it would tighten around the throats of every family touched by his presence. Fear took its first visible shape in the Haraway household during the August heat, when cicadas screamed from the treetops and the city's mood thickened into something brittle, ready to shatter at the slightest pressure. It began with a dinner, an unremarkable gathering on the surface, yet it marked the first crack in the veneer of respectability that Marcus Haraway clung to with desperate pride. That night, Eleanor sat at the long dining table, her hands trembling as she lifted her glass. Marcus spoke loudly about rail contracts and cotton yields, his voice booming as though volume alone could drown the silence between them. Their marriage had been unraveling thread by thread, though neither dared acknowledge the frayed edges. A servant entered the room to refill their cups. Marcus barely looked up. But Eleanor did. Her breath caught. It was Devereaux. The candlelight carved warm gold across his cheekbones, giving him an almost sculpted stillness. Marcus continued speaking, oblivious, but Eleanor's grip tightened on the armrest. "Madam," Devereaux murmured, leaning close enough that she caught the faint scent of horses and sun-warmed leather. "More wine?" Her heart hammered. "No, thank you." He paused, just for a moment, as though he sensed something in her voice, fear, longing, or the strange bond forming in the space neither of them confessed. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. "Eleanor, you're distracted. Again." She flinched. "Forgive me," she whispered. Marcus glared at Devereaux. "Leave us." Devereaux bowed his head and withdrew, but Marcus's eyes lingered on the door long after he vanished into the hallway. "What is happening to you?" he demanded. "You drift as though you live in a dream." Eleanor said nothing. What could she say? That the dreams felt more vivid than her waking life? That a presence seemed to watch her, observe her thoughts before she formed them? Or that sometimes, in the quiet before dawn, she felt her name whispered by a voice she recognized? Marcus pushed his plate aside. "If I find that any man in this household has given you reason to stray—" "I have strayed nowhere," Eleanor said sharply. Her husband's face reddened with anger, but beneath it flickered something else, fear. That same fear was spreading through the city. The Pickering household was the first to fall into public scandal. Abigail Pickering was discovered in the parlor at midnight, staring at the wall, murmuring a name over and over. Jonas, frantic, shook her shoulders. "Abigail, speak to me. What is happening?" She blinked slowly, as if waking from a trance. "He was here," she whispered. "The man, the one from my dreams." Jonas paled. "Abigail, stop. You're frightening me." She didn't stop. Couldn't. Her voice quivered. "He stood in the corner of the room. I saw him, Jonas. I swear I saw him." Jonas felt a cold sweat bead on the back of his neck. No one was in this room. "He spoke," she insisted, gripping his wrist. "He said my name." Jonas staggered back, horrified. "Abigail, why would he come to you?" She shook her head helplessly. Rumors ignited like dry brush. A wandering spirit, a curse, a man with an unnatural pull on the mind. But beneath every whispered theory emerged the same name, Devereaux. Thaddeus Primley, hearing of the incident, hurried to the Pickering home. Jonas met him on the veranda, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling. "I don't believe in hauntings," Jonas said, "but my wife, she saw someone, or believes she did." "And you?" Thaddeus asked. Jonas hesitated too long. "I've had dreams," he admitted. "Not the same as hers, but of someone standing at my bedside. The figure doesn't move, doesn't speak, just watches." "What do you think it means?" Jonas swallowed hard. "I fear I know." Thaddeus scribbled the words "shared vision," "shared visitor," into the margins of his book. Then Jonas said something that made Thaddeus's blood run cold. The figure in her dreams. She described him perfectly. I recognized the description immediately. "It's him. It's Devereaux." Thaddeus stared. "But you said the man in your dreams has no face." Jonas's voice cracked. "He doesn't. Yet somehow, I know it is him." The third major incident struck the Whitcomb estate, where Idella's strange experiences intensified into terror that spread through the cabins. One night the workers awoke to her screams echoing across the yard. They burst into her cabin to find her kneeling by the door, clawing at the wooden floorboards, sobbing. "He was inside," she gasped. "Not in a dream, not this time." They lit lanterns, searching the cabin. No one was there, no footprints, no sign of intrusion, but Idella shook violently as she clung to Ruthland's hand. "He touched my shoulder," she whispered. He leaned close and said, "Do not be afraid. You will understand when the time comes." Ruthland helped her onto the bed, hand trembling. "Child," she murmured, "you're not yourself. This heat plays tricks." Idella shook her head violently. "No trick. He was here, and he was not angry, just waiting." Ruthland left the cabin hours later with the chill that followed her all the way home. She sat before her small hearth and whispered a prayer. "Lord, if something walks among us unseen, show me what it is, or at least show me how to stop it." But the room felt no lighter. The shadows did not recede. Elijah Breeden was the first to put words to the rising fear. During a supply run, he confronted Marcus Harroway openly in front of several townsmen. "That man of yours, the handsome one, he's poison, Marcus. Families are coming undone, and every whisper points to him." Marcus bristled. "I won't be made a fool by superstitious ramblings." Elijah leaned in close. "You already are. Ask your wife why she can't sleep. Ask the Pickerings why they're losing their minds. Ask anyone whose house feels wrong in the night." Marcus tried to scoff, but Elijah held his gaze too long, too steadily. "You'll see," Elijah said, stepping back. "Beauty that perfect? It's a warning, not a gift." Eleanor, meanwhile, could no longer hide her unraveling nerves. She avoided mirrors. She avoided the courtyard. She avoided her husband. But she could not avoid the dreams. One night she woke to the soft creak of her bedroom door. Her breath caught. A silhouette stood in the doorway, not approaching, just watching. For a heartbeat she could not scream. Then she blinked, and the figure was gone. The hallway lay empty, silent, still. She rushed to the courtyard window, trembling, and there, beneath the moonlight, stood Devereaux, alone, unmoving, as though expecting someone. When she turned away from the glass, her reflection did not look like her own. Thaddeus compiled the accounts, cross-checking dates, locations, and people involved. He noted a pattern. Each household affected had interacted with Devereaux directly, or had wives who had seen him, even briefly. He sought out Devereaux again, finding him alone in the stables, grooming a horse. The air felt unnaturally still. Dust motes hung suspended in the shafts of light piercing the rafters. "Devereaux," Thaddeus said quietly, "may I speak with you?" Devereaux looked up, expression unreadable. "Something is happening in this city," Thaddeus continued. "People are frightened. Dreams, visions. Some claim they've seen you where you could not have been." Devereaux returned to brushing the horse's mane. "People see what they fear, or what they desire." "But which are you?" Thaddeus pressed. "A fear or a desire?" Devereaux's hand stilled. "I am neither," he murmured. "What they see is not me, or perhaps not only me." "What does that mean?" Devereaux met Thaddeus's gaze sharply. For a moment something shifted behind those dark eyes, something too old, too aware. "Truth finds a way," he said softly, "even when men bury it, and when truth rises it does not choose gentle forms." Thaddeus felt a cold sweat prick his neck. "Are you saying something is following you?" he whispered. "No," Devereaux replied. "Something is waking through me." By early autumn, Atlanta was steeped in paranoia. Men avoided discussing their wives' strange spells. Women whispered behind closed doors. Workers exchanged glances whenever Devereaux passed, respectful yet wary. The atmosphere changed. Nights grew heavier, dreams sharper, the sense of being watched more constant. Some blamed fever, others blamed the devil, but the truth, whatever it was, had not yet taken full shape. The horror had begun its ascent, tightening its grip around the city. What do you think, guilty souls cursed by God, or victims of madness? Tell us below. Your theories matter here. The first frost came early that year, biting through the red clay streets before the leaves had fully yellowed. Atlanta's citizens took it as a sign of what they could not agree. Some said it meant the coming winter would be merciless. Others insisted it meant God himself was unsettled. But the few who whispered privately, those whose dreams had grown sharp as cracked glass, believed the frost meant something else entirely. Something was drawing near. Then, Thaddeus Primley felt it most keenly when he read over his accumulated notes, pages filled with anxious handwriting and ink-smeared margins. Every account pointed to Devereaux, yet none accused him directly. He was a presence, a catalyst, a shadow moving just beyond the reach of linear explanation. It troubled Thaddeus deeply. He had begun this as a journalist's curiosity, but now the story felt like a trap he was walking into willingly. One night, after hours spent cross-referencing testimonies, he closed his journal and whispered to himself, "What are you, Devereaux?" The lamp on his desk flickered. Just once, but in that brief dimming, Thaddeus felt a shift in the room, as though someone had stepped forward from a corner he had not realized was dark. He rose quickly, the hairs on his arms lifting. "Is someone there?" Silence pressed against the walls. Then, so softly, he questioned his sanity. A voice answered from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You already know the beginning of it." Thaddeus spun. The room was empty. On the Haraway estate, truth clawed its way toward revelation through Eleanor's disintegrating composure. She spent more hours by her bedroom window now, staring into the night as though watching for a sign. Her dreams had become clearer, almost lucid. She no longer saw only a silhouette. She saw eyes, hands, breath, the warmth of a presence inches from her sleeping body. But the most disturbing change was what she felt upon waking, an absence, like a hollow carved into her ribs. She had grown terrified of what that hollow might be waiting to hold. Marcus noticed the deepening shadows beneath her eyes. One evening he confronted her in the parlor, cigar smoke curling around his head. "Eleanor," he said, soft but firm, "I want to show you something." She looked up slowly. "What is it?" He withdrew a letter from his coat. "A message from Elijah Breeden. He claims—" Marcus hesitated, fingers trembling in a way she had never seen. "He claims that Devereaux was seen wandering behind the Pickering property long after nightfall, that he's been observed speaking to women alone, that he—" Eleanor cut him off sharply. "Do you believe such things?" Marcus's voice strained. "I don't want to." "Then don't," she said. But her tone was too quick, too defensive, and Marcus heard it. He searched her face. "Eleanor, why do you protect him?" She stood so abruptly, the chair scraped against the floor. "You think I would betray you? You think I seek the company of—" She couldn't speak the word. Slave. The ugliness of it caught in her throat. Marcus stepped closer. "Then tell me what is happening to you." She swallowed hard. "I cannot." It was the truth. She did not know how to speak of things that felt both real and impossible. Marcus's expression shifted, something tightening in his jaw. "I will not let my household become the center of scandal," he said. "I will not let this man unmake what I have built." He stormed out. Eleanor pressed her trembling hands to her face. Behind her, the parlor mirror fractured, not breaking, but rippling, as though some unseen presence disturbed the surface of its reflection. Ruthlyn Carter, meanwhile, sought answers the only way she knew, through prayer. On a cold morning she visited a quiet, modest church at the city's edge, where the pews were rough-hewn and the choir loft smelled of cedar. She knelt, hands clasped, murmuring, "Lord, something walks in this place, not man and not quite spirit. Show me the truth." The door behind her creaked open. She turned. Devereaux stood framed in the morning light. Her breath caught. "Child, what are you doing here?" He stepped inside slowly, boots silent on the wooden floor. "I didn't come to pray." Ruthlyn rose. "Then why?" He looked around the empty sanctuary, expression unreadable. "Because you're the only one who doesn't fear me." She frowned. "I fear what I don't understand. Not you." He hesitated. "You should." Ruthlyn stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Tell me what follows you, boy." Devereaux lifted his eyes to hers. Something ancient moved in their depths. Pain, recognition, resignation. "I dreamed last night," he said quietly. "I saw a house burning, and inside it were faces I knew. Your face, Mrs. Haraway's, Jonas Pickering's, all calling my name." Ruthlyn's skin pricked cold. "What did the fire mean?" Devereaux shook his head. "Not fire. Revelation. Something hidden is trying to surface." Ruthlyn inhaled deeply. "Are you causing it?" "No," he said, "but I cannot stop it." The church groaned as if responding to his words. Ruthlyn stiffened. "What is waking, Devereaux?" He whispered, barely audible. "A truth older than me, older than all of this." Thaddeus received his breakthrough and his curse on a night thick with fog. He had arranged to meet a former overseer from a plantation outside Macon, a man rumored to know something of Devereaux's past. The overseer, Merrick Hale, was a gaunt figure with hollow cheeks and eyes that darted like trapped birds. They met behind a tavern, where the lamplight stretched thinly across the dirt. "You want to know where he came from?" Hale said, voice rasping. You think the stories began here, in Atlanta? Thaddeus stepped closer. What do you know? Hale wiped sweat from his brow. I was there the day the previous master tried to sell him. I was there when the buyers backed away. Said the boy unsettled them. Said he'd made their heads ache. Said he looked too familiar. Thaddeus almost stopped breathing. Familiar. Hale nodded. Like they had dreamed him before. A chill crawled up Thaddeus's spine. People said he caused trouble, Hale whispered. Families falling apart, wives restless, husbands jealous, strange happenings, but I saw the truth. What truth? Hale's voice cracked. It wasn't him destroying them. It was something inside them, rising to meet him. He was just the mirror that showed it. Shah. Thaddeus staggered back. His pulse hammered in his ears. Hale continued, trembling. He ain't cursed. He's the key. Folks break themselves open when he's near. All the sins, the fears, the longing they hide, he calls it to the surface. And once it shows itself, there's no burying it again. Thaddeus felt the world tilt. Why? Hale's eyes filled with something like pity. Because people see him, and for the first time they see the truth about their own hearts. A crash echoed from the tavern behind them. Hale flinched violently. I shouldn't have told you, he whispered. I shouldn't have. He stopped mid-sentence. His breath hitched. He stared past Thaddeus, eyes wide with terror. Thaddeus turned. There was no one there. When he looked back, Hale was gone, vanished into the fog. By late October, the tension reached breaking point. Marcus Haraway called a private meeting of several influential men, including Jonas Pickering, Elijah Breeden, and 2 local clergymen. They gathered in the Haraway Library, surrounded by shelves of law books and manuscripts, the air thick with cigar smoke. Marcus addressed them grimly. We have a problem in this city. A man whose presence is unraveling households, my own wife included. Jonas shifted in his seat, guilt gnawing at his features. Elijah crossed his arms, lips tight. One of the clergymen cleared his throat. Are you suggesting witchcraft, Mr. Haraway? Marcus hesitated. I don't know what to call it, but I know it must end. Elijah slammed his fist on the table. Then say it plain. The man is a danger. We need to remove him. Jonas looked ill. You speak as if the man is an animal. Would you rather speak as if he's a phantom? Elijah retorted. Your wife screams in her sleep, Jonas. Mine has taken to locking the doors at night. People are losing their minds. Marcus stepped forward. We detain him, question him, and put an end to whatever is happening. The clergymen exchanged uneasy glances. Jonas whispered, and if he's innocent? Marcus's voice hardened. I no longer believe innocence exists where he walks. Thaddeus, hidden in the hallway, listening through the cracked door, felt a surge of dread. They were going to hunt Devereaux. They were going to turn suspicion into violence. They were going to ignite the fuse that would burn through every lie Atlanta had built to protect itself. The climax was no longer approaching. It had arrived. That night, the city slept uneasily beneath the creeping winter cold. Thaddeus left the Haraway estate in a near panic, desperate to warn Devereaux. Fog clung to the paths. Lanterns glowed like dying stars. The streets felt too quiet, as though the world were holding its breath. He reached the stables behind the Haraway house and found Devereaux sitting on a low stool, elbows resting on his knees, gaze fixed on the ground as though contemplating something far away. Thaddeus approached slowly. They're coming for you. Devereaux did not look up. I know. Thaddeus swallowed. Then leave, tonight. Before they... Devereaux raised a hand, stopping him. His voice was calm. Too calm. I cannot leave. Not now. Why? Thaddeus demanded. Devereaux finally lifted his eyes. The shadows around them thickened, as though the air itself bent toward him. "Because the truth is here," he murmured, "and it will break through whether I stand or run." Thaddeus stepped back. "What truth?" Devereaux rose slowly, and for the first time Thaddeus felt genuine fear, not of Devereaux himself, but of what he represented. A threshold, a mirror, a reckoning. Devereaux whispered, "Ask yourself why every household collapses the moment they look at me. Ask what they see. Ask what they cannot hide from anymore." The flames in the nearby lantern guttered violently. Thaddeus felt his heartbeat echo in his ears. "Who are you?" he whispered. Devereaux's answer was soft as snowfall, sharp as confession. "I am the face they gave their sins." A crack sounded from the trees. Torches flickered in the darkness. Marcus Harroway and his men stepped into the clearing. The hunt had begun. "If you stood in that room, would you call it crime or sacrifice? Leave your answer." The torches shuddered in the wind as if afraid of the men holding them. Marcus Harroway led the group, jaw clenched so tightly the tendons in his neck showed like cords. Behind him followed Elijah Breeden, 2 clergymen, Jonas Pickering, pale, trembling, and 3 hired men armed with rope, lantern hooks, and rifles. They emerged from the trees like a tribunal summoned by fear itself. Devereaux didn't move. He stood in the clearing beyond the stables, moonlight running across his face like a blade. The fog gathered at his feet. His posture was serene, but the air around him thrummed with a tension that made even the horses shift uneasily into their stalls. Thaddeus stepped instinctively between the approaching men and Devereaux. "Stop!" he shouted. "You don't understand what you're doing." Marcus's eyes were wild. "Move aside, Primley." "I won't," Thaddeus said. "Not until—" A gun cocked. It was Elijah. "Boy," Elijah snarled, "you're standing in front of something you don't comprehend. Now step away before you join him." Thaddeus's voice trembled, but he held his ground. "This isn't justice. It's hysteria." "Hysteria," Elijah spat. "Look around. This city's on its knees because of him." Marcus stepped forward. "Devereaux, you will come with us. You will answer our questions. And by dawn, this madness ends." Devereaux finally lifted his gaze to meet Marcus's. A strange quiet spread across the clearing, like the moment before lightning touches the earth. "I cannot answer questions you have not asked yourselves," Devereaux said softly. Marcus blinked. "Enough riddles." "They are not riddles," Devereaux murmured. "They are truths you buried so deep you forgot the weight of them." Elijah raised his rifle. "I've heard enough." The other men tensed. Jonas Pickering stepped forward suddenly, voice cracking. "Wait, just wait!" His hands shook as he pointed at Devereaux. "Tell me something. My wife, Abigail, she calls your name in her sleep." His voice faltered. "What did you do to her?" Devereaux's expression softened. "Nothing. I did nothing." "Then why? Why does she see you in her dreams?" Devereaux stepped forward, slow, deliberate. "Because your wife has lived her life as a shadow of someone else's choosing. She saw one moment in which she could be something other than obedient, and that moment took my shape." Jonas went pale. His lips trembled. No, that isn't—" "It is," Devereaux said, not unkindly. Jonas staggered back as if struck. Elijah's face contorted with disgust. "You talk pretty, but you think that makes you more than what you are?" He raised his rifle higher. "Answer me this. Why do families fall apart when you come near them?" Devereaux inhaled slowly. "Because you built those families on fear, possession, and lies. I did not break them. I revealed them." Marcus lunged forward. "Enough." He grabbed Devereaux's arm. The moment Marcus's hand touched him, every lantern in the clearing flickered violently. A wind screamed through the branches overhead, though no storm had been forecast. Leaves tore from the trees in spirals. Horses reared, hooves striking against the stable doors. Marcus froze, fingers still wrapped around Devereaux's wrist. Gasps rippled through the men as something unseen rippled through the air, like heat over sand, like breath on cold glass. Thaddeus felt the shift deep in his bones, a pressure building behind his eyes. "Marcus," he whispered. "Let him go." Marcus didn't move. And then, a crack split the night. But it wasn't a rifle. The sound came from the ground. The earth beneath Devereaux's feet darkened, as though soaked in shadow. Fog poured upward, coiling around his legs, rising like a spirit being drawn into a human form. The torches dimmed. The moon seemed to waver, blurred by something heavy and ancient pushing through the night air. Marcus released Devereaux as if burned, stumbling backward. What in God's name?" he choked. Devereaux exhaled, eyes half-lidded, as though something long imprisoned was finally stretching its limbs. Thaddeus whispered, "Is it you, or something else?" Devereaux turned to him. "It is truth," he said, "and truth always comes with a cost." The fog surged upward, swirling around his shoulders, gathering behind him in the shape of a massive, shifting shadow, like a man, and not a man, like a memory given flesh. The clergymen dropped their torches. One whispered hoarsely, "God shield us." Devereaux stepped forward, and with each step, the fog shadow followed, impossibly tall, impossibly fluid, mirroring him exactly, like a soul stretched too thin. Elijah raised his rifle again, voice cracking. "Stop! Stop where you are!" Devereaux did not stop. "I warned you," he said softly. Elijah pulled the trigger. The rifle fired. A deafening crack tore through the clearing. Thaddeus shielded his eyes. When he looked back, Devereaux was standing exactly where he had been. Jonas fell to his knees. Elijah backed away, rifle trembling in his hands. "What are you?" he gasped. "What are you?" For the first time, Devereaux's expression changed. He looked tired, not triumphant, not monstrous. Just weary. "I am what your sins needed me to be," he said. The torches guttered out all at once. Darkness swallowed the clearing. Only the moon illuminated the scene, and the shadow behind Devereaux grew clearer, more defined. The shape was unmistakably human, but its proportions were wrong, stretched beyond the limits of flesh and bone. It pulsed as though drawing breath through Devereaux himself. Thaddeus stared in horror and awe. "It's not inside you, is it? It's connected." Devereaux nodded once. Every man, every woman who looked at me, something in them woke, something they hid, something they feared. I merely reflected it. But reflections can accumulate, and now the weight of their secrets gathers here. The shadow leaned forward, mirroring him, its edges rippling like black fire. Elijah tried to run, but the fog surged past him and blocked his path like a living barrier. The clergymen clutched their crosses, whispering prayers. Jonas sobbed silently, rocking back and forth. Marcus Harroway stared, numb with terror. "You've cursed this city," Marcus whispered. "You've cursed my home." "No," Devereaux said. "Your home was cursed long before I entered it." Marcus's face twisted with rage and denial. "You destroyed my wife." Devereaux shook his head. Your wife destroyed herself trying to live in a cage you built for her. Marcus lunged again, but Thaddeus grabbed him. Stop, Thaddeus cried. You'll kill us all. Marcus shoved him away violently, but then froze, because the shadow had moved. It now stood directly in front of Marcus. Not behind Devereaux, not beside him. In front of Marcus. Marcus's breath hitched. The shadow's shape grew sharper, its features twisting and reforming until Marcus saw his own face staring back at him, only distorted, darkened, stripped of lies. Marcus staggered backward, horrified. No, he whispered. That's not me. That is not me. Devereaux spoke the words that broke the night. It is the man you became when no one was watching. Marcus screamed. The shadow lunged, but it did not strike him. It entered him. His body convulsed violently, back arching as though invisible hands lifted him by the ribs. His eyes rolled white. His mouth foamed. His limbs seized in unnatural angles. Jonas cried out. Elijah fell to his knees. The clergymen dropped their Bibles and fled into the trees. Thaddeus stepped forward despite every instinct screaming at him to run. Devereaux, stop this! Devereaux turned to him, and for the first time, fear flickered across his face. I can't, he said. It has chosen. The shadow poured into Marcus's body like ink spilling into water. Marcus collapsed. The clearing went silent. Then Marcus rose to his feet. But it was not Marcus anymore. His movements were wrong, jerking and puppet-like. His eyes opened. Black. Completely black. He looked at Devereaux and smiled. A terrible, crooked smile. Thaddeus whispered, What is it now? Devereaux shook his head slowly. It has become what he always feared he was. Marcus took one step forward, then another. Devereaux stepped back. Jonas screamed, Help him! But Thaddeus grabbed him. We cannot. Marcus raised his hand. The air thickened, shimmering like heat above a furnace. Devereaux closed his eyes, resigned. And then a voice pierced the night. Stop! Everyone turned. Eleanor Haraway stood at the edge of the clearing, barefoot, pale nightdress billowing in the wind, lantern in hand. Her face was streaked with tears. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders. Eleanor, Thaddeus gasped. She walked forward slowly, ignoring the man who tried to reach her. Ignoring the shadow latched onto her husband. Ignoring the terror gathering around her. She stopped inches from Devereaux. Her voice trembled. Tell me the truth. Did I bring this? Devereaux's expression softened with unbearable sorrow. No, he said, but you were the only one who saw me clearly. She choked back a sob. Then tell me how to end it. Behind her, Marcus's possessed body trembled violently, preparing to strike. Devereaux said, There is only one way. Eleanor nodded. She did not ask what it was. She knew. She stepped closer to Devereaux. Marcus screamed, a sound that tore through the trees and split the air. His body convulsed as though trying to break free from itself. Eleanor whispered, I forgive you. Marcus froze. The shadow froze. Devereaux's breath hitched sharply. The clearing held its breath. Eleanor repeated louder, stronger. I forgive you, Marcus Haraway. The shadow recoiled as if burned. Marcus collapsed to his knees, clutching his head, gasping as though drowning. Devereaux closed his eyes, swaying. Forgiveness breaks the mirror. The shadow screamed, a piercing, impossible sound. It tore itself free of Marcus's body, shredding into ribbons of dark mist that spiraled upward into the night sky and vanished. The wind died. The fog thinned. The moon shone clearly once more. Marcus fell unconscious. Jonas sobbed. Elijah crawled backward on shaking arms. Thaddeus could not speak. And Devereaux. Devereaux sank to his knees. The shadow was gone, but the toll was carved into his face: exhaustion, grief, and a strange relief that looked almost like freedom. Eleanor knelt beside him, placing a hand gently over his. "You've carried the weight of our sins," she whispered, "but they were never yours." Devereaux met her gaze, and for the first time, he looked human. Utterly, painfully human. The truth had surfaced. The reckoning had passed. But the cost would ripple far beyond that clearing. The morning after the clearing felt wrong, as though the sun had risen over a world holding its breath. Mist hovered low across Atlanta's red clay streets, muffling the usual bustle of wagon wheels and merchants. The city, in its quiet way, understood that something had shifted in the night, even if it could not yet name the change. The Haraway estate was the first to feel the weight of consequence. Marcus lay in his bed, pale and trembling, unable to recall what had unfolded. Whenever he tried to speak, he faltered mid-sentence, eyes darting as though he sensed shape still moving just beyond the corners of sight. Physicians were summoned, 2 from Atlanta and 1 from Marietta, but none could diagnose his condition. Some speculated a seizure, others a collapse brought on by stress. But Eleanor knew. She stood at her husband's bedside, hands folded tightly, watching the rise and fall of his shallow breaths. A house servant asked softly, "Ma'am, will he recover?" Eleanor breathed slowly before answering. "Yes," she whispered, "but he will not return unchanged." Whispers spread quickly. Servants carried fragments of rumor into the quarters, and those rumors braided themselves into a narrative that seeped across the city. A man had been overcome by a dark visitation. A hidden sin had been forced into the open. A gathering of men in the night had led to a spiritual reckoning. No one said Devereaux's name aloud. Not yet, but the silence around him was its own confession. Meanwhile, Jonas Pickering arrived home near dawn, his clothes torn from kneeling in the clearing, his face streaked with tears and dirt. Abigail rushed to him, pressing her trembling hands to his cheeks. "Jonas, what happened? Tell me." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The truth felt too large, too strange for language. How could he describe the moment he had seen his own cowardice reflected in another man's suffering? How could he admit that the figure haunting his dreams had been nothing more than his own fear wearing another man's face? "I saw myself," Jonas finally whispered. His voice cracked. "And I saw what I'd allowed my life to become." Abigail held him tightly. For the first time in months, their embrace did not tremble from suspicion or dread. Something tender returned to them, like the first faint color in a storm-bruised sky. Ruth Lynn Carter walked into town the following afternoon to check on Idella and the other workers who had been trembling with fear for weeks. She found them sitting outside the cabins, talking quietly, hands clasped. The oppressive heaviness that had haunted the quarters seemed to have lifted, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. Idella saw Ruth Lynn approaching and stood quickly, rushing into her arms. "Miss Ruth Lynn, it's gone. I woke this morning and felt like a stone had rolled off my chest." Ruth Lynn brushed a hand lovingly over the girl's hair. "Truth has a way of cleansing a place, child, but the price is always high." Idella's voice wavered. "Do you think it's finished?" Ruth Lynn looked toward the horizon, where the tree line met the pale autumn sky. "The storm has passed," she said, "but the ground it soaked will never forget." The newspapers, ever hungry for scandal, arrived at the Haraway gates by midday. Thaddeus Primley stood among them, watching his fellow journalists shout questions toward the estate. Questions that would never be answered truthfully. A butler met them with a rehearsed statement. "Mr. Haraway is unwell. Mrs. Haraway requests privacy. There will be no further comment." But Thaddeus saw something in Eleanor's silhouette behind the parlor curtains, a figure standing straighter than she had in months, no longer shrinking into the shadows of her own home. She had broken the cycle. She had done what none of the men could. She had forgiven. Thaddeus turned away from the crowd and walked toward the stables. He knew where Devereaux would be. He found him sitting on the low stone wall beside the pasture, shoulders slumped, face turned toward the wind. For the first time since arriving in Atlanta, Devereaux looked weary, not with the haunted weight he had carried before, but with a human exhaustion, clean and raw. Thaddeus approached quietly. "The city is talking." Devereaux gave a faint, tired smile. "They always will." "They're afraid," Thaddeus said. "Even now." "I know." "You could leave," Thaddeus offered. "Tonight, before they decide what story to tell about you." Devereaux looked toward the Haraway house, toward Eleanor's window. "No," he said. "If I leave now, the truth becomes myth, and myth becomes blame. The people here need to understand that what happened was their own doing, not the work of a demon." Thaddeus sat beside him. "Will they ever accept that?" Devereaux shook his head. "Some will. Most won't. But acceptance is not my purpose." "Then what is?" Devereaux's eyes softened. "To walk away free of their sins. To no longer be the mirror they fear." The two men sat in silence for a long moment, listening to the wind and the dry grass. Thaddeus finally said, "You changed this place." "No," Devereaux replied quietly. "This place changed itself. I only revealed the cracks." The legal aftermath unfolded quietly but decisively. The private assembly Marcus had organized in the night, the armed confrontation in the clearing, could not be explained away as a simple misunderstanding. Clergymen gave hesitant statements. Jonas confessed to being unwell and incapable of testifying clearly. Elijah Breeden denied all wrongdoing but resigned from his overseer position within the week. No formal charges were brought in. Atlanta, in 1850, was not a place where wealthy men faced legal consequences for violence against someone they considered property. But the social repercussions were far-reaching. The Haraway name, once spoken with deference, was now uttered with careful pity. Neighbors avoided discussing Marcus's mental state, though the tremor in his hands and the softness that replaced his former cruelty told its own story. Eleanor, for her part, stepped into a quieter strength. She took charge of household affairs with a calm authority that startled those who once dismissed her as fragile. Her demeanor changed, not hardened, but clarified, like steel tempered in flame. When asked by a visiting cousin what had happened that dreadful night, she answered only, "We faced ourselves, and most of us survived." Devereaux's fate came to its turning point 2 weeks after the incident. At dawn, Eleanor found Marcus sitting in his study, staring at the cold fireplace. She approached him cautiously. "Marcus," she said softly, "it is time." He didn't look at her. "Time for what?" "For you to release him." Marcus closed his eyes. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "He ruined us." Eleanor shook her head gently. "No. Our ruin began long before him." Marcus's breath shuddered. "If I free him, what will become of us?" She placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "A chance at redemption." Later that morning, Marcus signed the manumission papers with a trembling hand. His signature faltered, but the seal pressed cleanly. Devereaux was free. He accepted the document quietly, head bowed. When he looked up, his eyes met Eleanor's. not with longing nor with sorrow, but with the unspoken understanding of two people who had seen the truth and survived it. He turned to Marcus. "Thank you," he said. Marcus flinched. Gratitude, real, undeserved gratitude, cut deeper than any accusation. Devereaux left Atlanta before sunrise the next day. No one witnessed his departure except Thaddeus, who stood beneath the old oak by the road and watched him walk west, a small bundle over his shoulder, coat whipping in the wind. "Will I see you again?" Thaddeus called out. Devereaux lifted a hand in farewell, then paused. "You will hear of me," he said. "Wherever truth is buried, it eventually finds a way to breathe." He turned and continued down the long red road until the fog swallowed him completely. Atlanta healed, in its uneven way. Families rebuilt themselves on more honest ground. Some marriages did not survive. Others grew stronger. A few fled the city altogether, unwilling to face the pieces of themselves they had glimpsed. But the story of the handsome slave who broke the illusions of Atlanta lived on, half rumor, half warning. Some said he was a cursed man who carried spirits with him. Others said he was a saint, driving out hypocrisy like demons. A smaller number whispered that he was not supernatural at all, merely a man who showed people the truth they feared most. Thaddeus knew which version was closest to reality. He wrote only one sentence in his journal to mark the end of the case. Devereaux left no bodies behind, yet he changed the shape of every soul he touched. Atlanta would never speak his name publicly again. But in private, in hushed recollections shared across candlelit tables, people always said the same thing. He didn't destroy families. He revealed what was already broken. Some said that was a mercy. Others said it was the greatest horror imaginable. In the decades that followed, Atlanta grew into a city of steel and flame, rebuilt and reborn. Yet the whisper of that winter night endured in the quiet corners where memory settles like dust. Stories of Devereaux surfaced in unexpected places, an aging clergyman's trembling sermon, a widow's diary hidden beneath floorboards, a journalist's unpublished notes left to yellow in a cedar trunk. Each account differed, yet all carried the same uneasy truth. Sometimes the darkest terrors are not spirits or curses, but the reflections we spend our lives avoiding. Even now, when the wind moves strangely through the pines south of the city, a few old families swear the air feels like that night, heavy, watchful, honest. So, what do you believe? Was this a haunting, or a revelation too painful for its witnesses to accept? Write your theory in the comments. And if you want us to keep digging into America's forgotten shadows, like this video and subscribe for next week's story.